Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. You are now listening to season 7 of the show. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Dorna Moini. Dorna attended New York University, completing her BA in economics, before going on to the University of Southern California School of Law to complete her JD. Dorna is the CEO and founder of 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐭𝐞𝐧𝐢𝐬𝐿, a no-code platform for building online legal products. Prior to founding 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐿, Dorna was an associate at Sidley Austin, LLP, and Shepherd Mullen. Dorna has experience as a judicial law clerk at the UN International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. She is on the Legal Services Cooperation Emerging Leaders Council and is a member of the LAFLA's advisory board. Dorna was named the ABA Legal Rebel and a Fast Case 50 honoree. So a very warm welcome, Dorna.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. I have been following your podcast for a while, so I'm super excited to be joining you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And before we dive into all your amazing projects, experiences, and what you're getting up to for the legal and wider community, we do have an icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality if you've seen it?
Unfortunately, I barely watch any TV, and so all I know, and I asked you this before we started, was that that's the one that has Meghan Markle, and I know nothing else about Suits.
So with that, we'll give it a 0 and move swiftly on to talk all about you and your amazing journey. So to begin with, Dorna, would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Yes. So I'll start with when I went to law school and why I went to law school. So my family is Iranian. And so growing up, I always saw a pretty big disparity between the legal systems in different countries. And while there are obviously lots of flaws in the US, justice system, I did see a lot of opportunity. And so that was one of the reasons that I wanted to go to law school. Ended up going to law school and then got pulled into paying off my student loans and working for a big firm. And so straight out of law school, I went to go work for a big firm. And then during that process, I was actually doing a lot of work with domestic violence survivors. We'll probably get a little bit deeper into this, but that led me eventually to building a legal technology product, which is called 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐿, which is where I am today. And we are a growing company and we serve lawyers across the world.
Absolutely. We're big fans of 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐿 over here on the Legally Speaking podcast, and I can't wait to talk more about that a little bit later on. But let's just unpack a few of those pieces there, because I believe you studied economics at the University of New York before going on to complete your JD. Where did your initial interest from the law come from? Was it sort of a personal reason or a passion of yours? You always wanted to be connected to the law?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually wanted to work on more legislative drafting. When I was in college, right after college and before starting law school, I worked on legislative drafting in West Africa. So I speak a few different languages, and I worked in Mauritania, Mauritania, for those who don't know where it is, it's actually a very large country on the west coast of Africa, in West Africa. And but a lot of people just don't know what it is because it's seldom talked about. And it was the last country with traditional forms of slavery. And so one of the projects that I worked on with Open Society Institute, which is where I worked, and with some local legal aid organizations on the ground there, was creating legislation that basically abolished slavery, at least on paper. There's obviously lots of things that need to be done after the fact to enforce those mechanisms. But that was my sort of passion, and that's what I wanted to do, given what I had seen in how different justice systems are in different countries. So that was the initial reason for going to law school, and then never ended up actually going down fully the human rights path.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned you speak a few different languages. What are some of the ones maybe but less common or less known to us that you speak?
Yeah, so I speak Farsi, which is actually my first language. My parents are from Iran. I went to a French school, so I speak French. And then the only other language, obviously I speak English, but I also speak California Spanish. So
I like that. I like that. It's better than me. So my dad is Iraqi, but I still don't speak Arabic. So I've got a lot of catching up to do in terms of your language capabilities. So let's dive a little bit deeper, because you spent a short period of time as a field consultant for I believe S7E9 as a local NGO. So what was that NGO specifically about, and what were your experiences, particularly as a field consultant?
Yeah, so that was actually the local legal aid organization that was on the ground in Mauritania. And so that experience it was actually in conjunction with, I worked with SOS Esclave, which means like SOS, like help, Esclave means slave. And it was an organization that was run by someone who actually was in slavery himself previously and had come out of slavery. Mauritania is a really interesting country racially, and so I mean, I haven't been there for a long time, so I'm speaking from my experience like 10 years ago, but there's a very interesting dynamic between the different races, and that's something that's being remedied over time. But this organization was working with Open Society Institute, which is the organization that I worked with in New York, to just help draft legislation in all these different languages. So it had to be in English, it had to be in Arabic, and I don't speak Arabic, and it had to be in French. And then working with the National Assembly to get it passed. And actually, by the time that I left, when I was there in Mauritania, we got the legislation passed, which was really an amazing feat for the organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love everything that stands for. Now, I can imagine that's stuff that sits really, really proudly with you in terms of the work and all that was achieved then. So from there, I believe in 2012, you were then a judicial law clerk at the UN International Criminal Tribunal, the former Yugoslavia. So how did you obtain that unique opportunity?
Yeah, so when I was in law school, I worked with the International Human Rights Clinic. And that was one of I think for anyone who's out there listening, clinical programs in law schools are really the best and most immersive experiences that you can have to really learn about what it's like on the ground. And so the clinic that I was working with was the International Human Rights Clinic, and our professor had a relationship with the UN, and we were working with the UN throughout the semesters. And then we had the opportunity to apply for basically a judicial clerkship with the ICTY, or you could have done the ICTR, which was the one for Rwanda, which was still open at the time. And the ICTY is the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, so war crimes related to those incidents. And I actually worked on a really interesting case. It was Haradinaj, who was the former prime minister of Kosovo. I was not working on either side, so I wasn't working on the prosecution side or the defense side. I was working in chambers. So it was actually the retrial of Haradinaj's trial, because there was a previous mistrial, and we were basically just fact gathering, law gathering, and writing portions of this huge judgment. So none of us had a hand in, well, some of the probably senior people did, but I did not have a hand in the entire judgment. But I worked on specific pieces for specific war crimes and very specific incidents that had occurred during the war, because there was, happened over several years. So that was a really interesting experience, really great way to understand how fact gathering goes, and be part of that at the UN.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sounds like you say super interesting, but great experience and great building blocks to start of your sort of career. And then from there, you then were, I understand, you spent time as an associate at Shepherd Mullen. So, what did you specialize in, and what were your responsibilities at the firm?
Yeah. So my time at the tribunal was actually sort of like my bar trip. You know how everyone does a bar trip at the
Yeah.
after law school. So I had a gap between when we took the bar and when I started at Shepherd, and so that's what, instead of going on a bar trip, I decided to go work at the court. And then when I started at Shepherd Mullen, I worked in employment law, and it was a very interesting. Employment law is just, it's fascinating. There are so many interesting fact patterns there. But what was really fun was that I also got a ton of experience very early on in my career. Whereas, usually when you're at a big firm and there are cases that go to trial, the younger associates or the more junior associates are not taking on big parts of the case. But because there are so many witnesses in some of these employment cases, I got to do depositions in my first year. I got to take witnesses. I got to actually go out to administrative hearings and run entire administrative hearings on my own as a first chair. That was probably not first year. That was probably like second, third year. But that was one of the best parts of the experience, was just really being handed responsibility.
Yeah, I love that you got so much responsibility earlier on into your career. But I always say to people, you put yourself in the right places, the good things will happen. And you clearly did that. You got into a place where you got to learn some fascinating areas of law. So from there, you then moved on to Sidley Austin as a trial lawyer, I believe, defending companies. So what types of cases did you handle there, and any that particularly stood out to you?
Yeah, so that was actually a pretty natural transition from my work at Shepherd. It was very similar types of work, but I basically just got kind of pulled over there by a partner who was working there, who I knew, and very much similar work. I think I probably worked. I worked more on class actions at my time in Shepherd, and then once I went over to Sidley, I probably worked a little bit more. I still had a lot of class action experience, but I also worked a little bit more on some of the high stakes, um, you know, discrimination, retaliation, and trade secret cases. I worked for example, it would usually be something like an employee stealing trade secrets, or employee leaving a company with very important information, or an employee who maybe was very high up and was suing for retaliation. And so what was interesting about some of those is that it was a combination of legal work and a little bit of like PR work too, because these cases were oftentimes high profile for the company. But again,
Yeah.
really great experience, really great mentors I had in both of those jobs, and I think that really created the foundation for my future career. Even though I'm not practicing anymore, it was really the foundation for why I'm able to do what I am doing now.
Yeah, and I love your career journey and story, because I talk a lot about building blocks for your career, and moves that you make and how that can help round or give you new skill sets and new experiences and help you to go on to other things. And you mentioned a very important point that we talk a lot about on the show, is around mentorship as well. And it's great that you had mentors and lent on mentors, because they can help shortcut a lot of the mistakes that you might make. They've got the experience, they've got the wisdom, they've got the know-how. So I love how you lent on them as well. So there's some real great guidance and suggestions and advice you're sharing here. So thanks for that. I want to stick with Sidley, because as part of your pro bono practice at Sidley, you worked with legal aid organizations. So what clients did you represent there?
Yeah, so most of my legal aid, my pro bono experience came in immigration, mostly asylum, and then also in domestic violence law. And domestic violence becomes sort of relevant to my career path as well. But what I mostly did is I worked with legal aid organizations. They might have cases that they needed help on for specific clients, and they would give me those clients. And again, it was one of those areas where I obviously love these types of cases, because I was able to make more of an impact on people's lives who didn't have access to attorneys, and hopefully move them in the right direction. But it also gave me a lot of really really great experience. I got to run cases from beginning to end, and we always had supervising partners who had done this work for many years within our firm. So also got the guidance and learning from that as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love that you've done that. And even from the start of your journey, and even from what you did right back in school, I can clear that values, helping people, supporting people, offering solutions, being there is just part of your fabric and who you are. And that brings us to the present day, where you are the very proud founder and CEO of 𝐤𝐻𝐿, formerly known as 𝐷ocuMate. What is 𝐤𝐻𝐿 for folks that may be less familiar, and what services do you provide?
Yeah. So 𝐤𝐻𝐿 is a no-code platform, which means you don't need to know how to code, that allows you to build end-to-end legal automation and legal products. So we usually, what people do when they start with 𝐤𝐻𝐿 is they want to build document automation or legal automation for their practice. So for example, maybe they want to automate a set of documents that they're going to use in-house. But our platform is actually much more than just the document automation. We allow you to do full workflow automation, build expert systems, create client portals where you can collect data from your clients through client intake, push them into documents, have your clients update their information, and you can collaborate with your clients as well. And then what's also interesting is we have seen a huge rise in legal productization, which is lawyers using taking their services and turning them into online legal products. I can give some examples of that as well. But that is one area that we are a platform on which, if you want to build an end-to-end legal product, you can build that on 𝐤𝐻𝐿. So I'll get, as a sort of analogy, what I usually say is, let's say you are an attorney and you practice in divorce law and you want to build something that is sort of like TurboTax. But are you familiar with TurboTax? Because I know not only US folks are familiar with.
Explain it for our UK listeners who may be less familiar.
Yeah, it's basically you go in, you enter all your information as an individual, and it generates your tax documents for you, which may sound simple, but there are so many intricate laws that go into the background. So TurboTax is really widely known and widely used in the US. I actually forget what the percentage is, but there's a huge percentage of Americans who use TurboTax to file their taxes. And so that it's oftentimes an analogy that the US folks know. But if you wanted to build something like TurboTax, but for a totally different area of law, so for example, divorce, you can do that on 𝐤𝐻𝐿. So let's say you're an attorney and you want to build a platform where your clients or customers come on, answer questions, are routed down different paths based on the answers that they give to those questions. And then at the end of that process, they are generated documents that they can either file in their case or that maybe you review before they can file. That's what you can build on 𝐤𝐻𝐿. So it's very, very robust.
What does that timeline look like for somebody who may be listening to this, who's maybe overwhelmed, who's like, I've been resisting using technology, but I need to get with the times. I need to be more efficient. I need to get more processes in place. Let's say they are that divorce attorney that's here. Let's say they give you a call tomorrow. What's the timeline between that call to implementation? Roughly, I appreciate it'll be bespoke and case by case.
Yeah, so that's actually why, we talked about how they're sort of, it's almost like a continuum of how people can use 𝐤𝐻𝐿. You might just use it for internal automation. And maybe you're not going down the client-facing route where you're billing people through our platform and generating tons of revenue directly through the platform. The initial phase, we have some template documents that you can start with, just right off the bat, depending on where you're practicing. And if you have a document or document set that is within your firm and more simple, you can either set it up yourself or we can help you set it up. So depending on the complexity of the document, a letter, let's say you're just automating all your engagement letters and all your retainer agreements, that you could probably set up within like an hour. Or if you're setting up, divorce for all 50 states in America, that's probably going to take you many months to build out because of all the complexities. It's really, think of it as you have all of this knowledge inside of your head, and the barrier is just taking that information and expertise from your head and spitting it out into 𝐤𝐻𝐿 so that it can turn into this product.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And I love it. And I like the sound of it. And I think a lot of our listeners should like the sound of it too, because I think it's super genius what you're doing. Time for a short break from the show. Are you still relying on spreadsheets to manage your legal matters? There's a better way to work. Our sponsor, 𝐤𝐤𝐬, is the cloud-based legal software that will transform the way your law firm operates. They offer legal practice management and client onboarding software that doesn't cost the earth. In fact, from as little as £49 per month, you can cut out all of those tedious admin tasks that you dread doing each week, each month. Automate the boring stuff, free up more time for the important stuff. That's what you get with 𝐤𝐤𝐬. Your clients will thank you for it, your bank account will thank you for it, your colleagues will thank you for it, and you can even thank me later for telling you all about it. So head to clio.com/legally speaking to see how 𝐤𝐤𝐬 can help you. That's clio.com/legally speaking. Now back to the show. Let's talk about a bit more of the 𝐤𝐻𝐿 journey, because you started as self-help legal, I believe, in 2018, where you built legal apps for low, moderate income consumers. So where did your idea for 𝐤𝐻𝐿 stem from, and why the name change rebrand?
Yeah. So when we initially started, I actually was not ever planning on going and starting a tech company. I was working at a firm. I loved my job. I got a lot of really great experience on both the work that I was doing within the firm and with the pro bono work that I was doing. But I was finding that a lot of the work that I was doing on these pro bono cases, particularly in the domestic violence arena, which is where it started, was very there were lots of rules and process that we could use technology to improve the process on. And so at the time, all I wanted to do was build a tool for domestic violence. I wanted to build something like TurboTax, so an end-to-end legal application, legal tool for domestic violence survivors. So they could get onto the platform, answer questions. If they were married, maybe it would give them additional questions. If they had children with this person, they might have additional questions. They might have visitation rights or custody rights they needed to type in information about. And then at the end of the process, it would generate their documents and allow them to go ahead and file those. So all I wanted to do was actually build an application for that. And I got together, I'm not an engineer, so I got together with a friend of mine who was an engineer. And I said, hey, will you help me build this tool? And I built out the whole spec for the project in a Microsoft Word document, because that's what lawyers do. And we built it, we launched it, and we got quite a bit of traction. And that was the product that was called Help Self Legal. So that was just the domestic violence tool itself. And we were getting quite a bit of traction from legal aid organizations, from pro bono attorneys within our firm, and then also from just individual consumers who were going through the process to generate the work product that they needed for their cases. Then what happened was that there were all of these other attorneys who started reaching out to us. And they were saying, hey, I want to build something like what you built for domestic violence in California, but not for domestic violence in California. I want to build this for other areas of law and other jurisdictions. So we had a little article that came out about us, about the platform, about the domestic violence platform. And in the day after that, I remember we got someone in Malaysia wanted to build a child support tool. Someone in Canada wanted to build a divorce tool. Someone in Arkansas in the US wanted to build an eviction defense tool. So that was our aha moment where we were like, oh, what we really need to do is we need to empower the individuals, the experts in these areas of law to build these tools. And that's why we built 𝐤𝐬𝐬𝐿 as a platform instead of in specific areas of law.
I love that. And that brings me on to my next entrepreneurial question, because, typically when you first start a business or businesses, they evolve, they adapt, they mold, and you find out things, you take feedback from your clients, prospective clients, your audience, your followers, your community. And it's clear how your platform has evolved stage by what you've just said there. What I'd like to ask you is, maybe vulnerably, what have been the challenges? Running a business is hard. It's one of the hardest things I think anyone can do. And I commend anyone who is brave enough to set up a business and go for it. And I encourage everyone to do it, but it isn't easy. So what have been some of your challenges you've had to overcome as the platforms evolve stage by stage?
Yeah, definitely. So we have, I think the main thing I would say is staying focused, because we have so many customers and potential customers pulling us in so many different directions. So at the very beginning, we started with, and we haven't really gone as much into our name change from 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐿, which was our former name, to 𝐤𝐬𝐿, which is our current name. We switched that up in January of this year. But we started out with document automation, which is still a very big part and a core piece of our platform that we're continuing to develop. But we realized that document automation could actually be applicable to so many different industries, not just legal. So we do have some clients in sales, HR, recruiting, in many different areas outside of legal. But at first it was very attractive. We're like, well, we can find customers anywhere, so let's just get them from everywhere. But what we realized was that we were being pulled in so many different directions. And so while it's attractive to say yes to a large contract that comes in from an organization who wants to use it in a different area, and we still do serve them, we decided to focus our marketing a lot more directly on lawyers, because that's who we're building the platform for. We know that if you're a lawyer who wants to automate your processes and you come onto the 𝐤𝐬𝐬𝐿 platform, you are going to find everything that you need And if there is something that you want that we don't already have, it's probably in our very near term roadmap. So I think for us, just taking that broader view and being really focused and disciplined has been, was a challenge, but also has been really valuable to us going forward.
That is absolute gold. If you're thinking of starting a business, currently struggling with a business, feeling overwhelmed, please rewind what Dorna's just said and listen back. There's 3 things that I take from that are super important. Understand your ICA, your ideal customer avatar, and really lean into that and understand and not get distracted by shiny new objects and pulled into different directions. Number 2, focus. Follow one course of action until successful. That's a very well-known acronym. It's super important. Stay focused, stay aligned to your goals, and then really niche down, inch wide, mile deep. So real wisdom shared there, folks. Really take notice of what Dorna's done with her business, how she is evolving, how it's so successful, but also how she has her finger on the pulse, but is focused. So thank you. Really, really appreciated you sharing that. Okay, I want 3 simple benefits to why people should use 𝐤𝐻𝐻's platform for building online products. Give me 3.
Yes. So I'll start with the simplest, which is time saved. So you are building these automated tools, and we actually have done some surveys on some of our customers. We did a survey of 50 different law firms that are on 𝐤𝐻𝐻 in the areas of family law, estate planning, and corporate, although you can use it in any area. And we found that they saved about 90% of the time that they previously spent drafting their documents. So that's one. 2 is just quality of life, because if you are able to automate some of the more routine and more process oriented parts of your work, you're able to scale out your practice, serve more people, and spend your time on the parts of the cases that you really love working on. So taking people to court or negotiation or things, practicing at the top of your license. And then 3, I would say, is revenue and new forms of revenue in particular. So yes, from number 2, you can scale out your practice and you can generate more revenue with the same amount of time, but you can also generate tech-enabled revenue. So we have a lot of features that allow you to add flat fee billing or subscription billing or other forms of billing to these tools that you create, and create either DIY platforms or hybrid platforms where you're unbundling your services and you're only participating in some of the process with the client. So those are the 3.
Yeah, I love that. 3 very, very important benefits as well. So thank you for outlining that. I talk a lot generally about social listening and feedback, and we've touched on it, but I want to ask a more direct question, particularly as you as a business owner, founder. Why is it important to get user feedback whilst building a new product? Generally, for other people in other industries might be listening as well. Why is it so important to get that user feedback?
Yeah, super, super important, because and it's especially important to get that early on and iterate on it very quickly. Because if you build your product and you're building it to the needs that you think you have kind of horse blinders on. And we have actually a pretty lengthy design process that we now go through, where we come up with the features that are maybe already based on some customer feedback internally, and then we iterate on the designs, and then we show mock-ups to our clients, to our customers. And the type of feedback that we get from our customers is oftentimes kind of baffling to us, because we have been inside of the system so much that we don't recognize where there may be inconsistencies, or where there may be things that people don't understand because they're not they haven't been working on it 24/7 for the past several months on a specific feature. So you're going to get a lot of really valuable insight from customers especially who have fresh eyes. And if you don't get that feedback early on, you're going to have a lot of rewinding to do once you launch and need to go make those changes throughout your entire platform. Obviously, I'm talking more about the tech platform, but this applies across the board to different business models.
Yeah, again, thank you for sharing that, because again, just sort of sharing my thoughts on your response. One is they're a very collaborative approach, right? You're sort of collaborating, taking feedback, and then providing these mock-ups, bespoke. It's very relationship led. And I'll tell you, folks, it's quite hard to get clients, but it's even harder to keep them. One of the best retention strategies is to actually ask for feedback, actually make them feel valued, because it's far more expensive and time consuming to continually go and get new and new clients. So never forget about looking after your existing ones, taking that feedback and scaling, then getting good quality referrals off the back of them. So really good quality learns there. Thanks again for sharing that. Let's talk about the wider industry then, Dorna. So what are your thoughts on the automation in the legal industry? Do you think we can bridge the gap between those who can afford legal services and those relying on legal aid?
Yeah, that's a great question and a very big question. I'm not necessarily saying that automation is the way to solve the access to justice gap. However, I think that it can be a very big part of solving the access to justice gap. As you know, I have US stats specifically, but the LSC, which is the Legal Services Corporation, has a stat from their last justice gap report that says that 92% of Americans don't have access to the critical legal needs that they have. These are specifically low income Americans. And so there are lots of ways in which we need to address that gap, making the law easier for one, not having Latin words on court forms that we have, making pro bono more widely accessible and having more people participate in that. But technology, I think, will play a very large role in that. I heard another stat that if every attorney were to do, the only way that we would solve the access to justice gap would be if every single attorney were to do 1,800 hours of pro bono a year. And so that's clearly not going to happen because we also need to bill clients and make money. So that's where I think technology can come in to scale out those practices. And we see our roots are in legal aid. We worked with domestic violence legal aid organizations early on. We worked with we still work with lots of legal aid organizations right now. And we see the impact and scale that technology can have on their work. And so I think while it's not the solution, it could be part of the solution.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I think it can go a long way to be part of the solution, but there is still more wider things that need to be considered to really bridge that gap, which again we are campaigning for here and supporting here on the Legally Speaking podcast. Okay, let's look into the future. What future developments can we expect to see in the legal tech sector?
Yeah, so I think that maybe I'll speak specifically from our perspective and what we are looking at. We think it's been estimated that in the next 10 years, about 90% of legal services are going to be delivered online. Right now, I believe the last stat on that was last year was 8%. And so we have a long way to go. And many other industries, if you look at tax, accounting, marketing, even medical services, they have a very large portion of them have gone online. And so legal is really lagging behind. And this is where I think there's a lot of opportunity for attorneys because there is this consumer demand for online legal services. And attorneys are just starting to meet that demand. And so if you can be the first one out there and you can scale something out there that serves a lot of people within your jurisdiction, within even very niche areas of law, there's a huge opportunity there. So I think the transition into online legal services is probably the biggest one that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And we've had people come on to the show who are big pioneers for the virtual law firms. We've had people who are running their law firms in the metaverse, taking depositions in the metaverse, running them in various virtual studios, online engaging, interaction, all of these cool things. And I think, again, if that scares or overwhelms you, then get around people like Dorna, get around people who are actually, pushing the needle, who can educate you, inspire you to get into the ways, because it is only going one way, folks. And I think it is a case now, if you're in the legal industry, to try and embrace this technology, really try and get educated and embrace it and surround yourself by amazing people like Dorna. Dorna, you also give back again because you teach the Legal Innovations Lab at USC Law School. Can you tell us more about what you teach?
Yes. So I'm actually not doing it this semester, but I have been teaching legal technology, and it's actually called the Legal Innovations Lab. And what we do is we just go through multiple different topics within legal technology and educate the students on what they should be seeing and what they should be looking out for. We've had lots of really great guest speakers throughout that program who have, some of them have been on your podcast, and some of them are really doing amazing things within the legal field. And then throughout that project, throughout that course, every student has to come up with a project that they present at the end of the semester. And so we've seen some really cool projects come out of that. So like there was one student who built out a platform for mental health for law students. We've seen things that are more very specifically legal, building corporations and building entities through technology platforms. So it's really inspiring to see what the next generation of lawyers is coming up with and how their fresh minds think about the legal industry. And that's been probably the most fun.
Yeah, and I love that, because it's something I'm so passionate about, is protecting, but also letting the next generation of talent be themselves and use this creativity to find solutions, to find better ways of, practicing the law. And, they mentioned a great example there of mental health, how we can improve the overall well-being so we don't have to be as stressed or as anxious or as worried as maybe years gone by. So I'm absolutely delighted that you're doing that work. And equally, it's something we're super passionate about here. And a personal mission of mine is to help the next generation of lawyers to feel happier, to feel like they can thrive in a community and safe environments and really be their true, authentic selves. Okay, Dawn, before we wrap up, what advice would you give to those thinking of founding their own legal tech platforms, or already have and looking to expand their services?
Yeah, so I would say my sort of little motto in this area is think big, start small, and iterate rapidly. And it actually touches on a lot of the stuff that we've talked about so far here, but think big. You definitely should. If you are going to start a company, you should have a very big idea of what impact you want to have on the world. So maybe you want to solve all of family law for the world. That's a great big mission to have. However, to be successful, you need to start with something small and get user feedback, as we were talking about earlier. So start with something niche, both in all within your audience, within your jurisdiction, and within the practice area that you're going to target first. So these actually stem from some of the learnings that we had early on from Focus. We really wanted to remain homed in on who is our audience, who is the person who is going to be the ideal persona who we're targeting, what jurisdiction are they in, and what very specific area of law are we helping them with. And then finally is iterate rapidly. So as you're taking that small project and you're turning it into your bigger vision, you always want to be getting customer feedback and iterating on what you've already built so that you can expand that in the most successful way possible.
Yeah, really good advice. And the one little nugget I took from that, which you sort of touched on, is just start. Everyone talks about one day. There is no one day. It's day one. Tomorrow is day one. Take action and then get on with it. I think it's the biggest thing I would say to sort of emphasize that. But this has been an absolute blast, Dorna, talking about your journey. If our listeners, which I'm sure they will, want to learn more about 𝐤𝐤, where can they find out a lot more?
Yes. So our website is www.𝐤𝐤.io. You can always email me personally. I am at dorna@𝐤𝐤.io. And then I'm also on every single social media, except I'm not on TikTok, though our company has a TikTok. And there's not a lot of other Dorna Moinis out there, so you'll probably find me pretty easily.
We absolutely will, and they absolutely will, and we'll share all of those links and your social media handles with this awesome episode too. That just leads me to say thank you so much, Dorna, for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Love your background, love your journey, love what you're doing with 𝐤𝐤. So from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast for now, wishing you lots of continued success with your future pursuits and career. But for now, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.